virtually any time I teach a retreat, I give a talk or devote significant time to talk about the five hindrances, and they have direct correlation to addiction. The hindrance of desire, of aversion, of sleepiness or sort of dullness, passivity, restlessness and worry, regret, and then doubt. And so each of them has significant implications in recovery and in addiction. And there's some really interesting sutta material on them as well, which I'm going to start getting into today. But it could take us a couple sessions at least to maybe go through the hindrances in the way that I'm thinking about it. And it seems like we have time, so nobody's going anywhere. So we might as well dig deep. This isn't a time to be superficial about anything. So, because the hindrances are so much. Hang on a second. I've gone back to earbuds for the time being. We're actually having our roof replaced, and so you might hear some thumping in the background, but if I have an open mic, you definitely hear thumping. So as I was going to say, because the hindrances are so tied up with meditation as well, they're a really good thing to just focus on as our practice to look at the ways they intrude on our meditation experience. And in that context, it's worth noting that, well, they have, they're called hindrances, so they hinder something. They do not hinder mindfulness necessarily. We can be mindful of the hindrances, but what they actually hinder is the development of concentration. So because of that, in mindfulness and insight meditation, we don't just focus on the idea of getting rid of the hindrances, but we really make a point of, initially at least, engaging them, seeing them clearly, seeing their what causes them to arise and what allows them to pass, and particularly what they are like to experience. What is it like to feel desire and aversion and sleepiness and restlessness and doubt? How are they affecting our thoughts, our emotional states, our physical states? So there's a whole investigation that we do around the hindrances. Now, the hindrances are generally unpleasant to experience, so we naturally enough want them to go away, which is actually just another hindrance, right? Wanting them to go away. But if we work with them skillfully, we're able to move through them, let them go. Maybe the sort of natural antidotes arise. In any case, there is a value in getting past the hindrances and in finding ways to. It's not that we want to just immerse ourselves in the hindrances. Oh, I'm feeling this desire. Let me just like really be in it. So there's this real balance and kind of dance that we have to do around working with them, because it is important to develop concentration if we can, to not be hindered by these qualities from getting some calm, from getting some peace. I find myself, particularly because I've been, for those of you who have been with me with Vimalasara, and we've been talking about the four great efforts. And we just finished that course with Inside LA. I've been particularly more acutely aware of that challenge of how to work with and what kind of effort to make in our meditation practice, and what's involved in that, how to be engaged in effort without it turning into grasping, how our effort cannot be aversive. And there is no simple formula to answer that question. It has to be answered through our own experience. We have to develop experience practicing and watching the process of meditation, experimenting, as Joseph Goldstein says, and seeing what kind of strategies and sort of attitudes we can develop and use in working with the hindrances. And even as we learn those things, they aren't necessarily universally applicable or applicable in every moment, because there are so many factors involved in our mind states, in our physical states, in our emotional states, moment by moment, that we have to learn to move with the different sort of flows of these states, of these different elements of our experience, and learn to and intuit to a great extent how to respond to them in a period of meditation. So again, this kind of means that there isn't a simple answer, and I hope that it also relieves us of the idea that we should get to some place of being good meditators who, for whom the experience is always, calm and peaceful, and our hearts are open, and everything's working. That it just doesn't seem to be like that. When I've really gotten down to talking brass tacks with some of the more advanced teachers that I know, what I hear from them is that it's not that they're in these exalted mind states all the time, and that they sit down and meditate. It's just like, got it, bliss out. But rather, it's that they are able to navigate the many mind states and maintain equilibrium or equanimity with those rising and falling, with those flows of mind states. So one other of my sort of ideas that I try to convey to people is that you are your own meditation teacher. That you can listen to different teachers, you can try different practices, but when it comes down to what's happening moment by moment in your mind and body as you're meditating, only you know what's going on. And only you can watch that process and see how it works. So the responsibility is ultimately on each of us to cultivate our own practice, to manage our own practice, to make choices in our practice. What do I need? Do I need to count my breaths right now, or do I need to let that go? Do I need to work on my heart practices, or do I need to, get into a concentrated state? Do I need to really look at this craving, what's going on there, or do I need to kind of just let it be and not try to figure it out? You know, and again, there's no one answer to any of these questions. So we have to learn to come to trust ourselves. That was a lot more than I was planning. Well, I wasn't planning anything as usual, but I have planned some things, but they're coming later. That was more than I was planning to talk about or thinking I would talk about. In any case, let's meditate and see what happens. Okay? And that's actually what we do when we meditate, right? It's not that we meditate and make something happen. We meditate and see what happens. So, settling into your meditation posture. And gently closing the eyes or just lowering your gaze. And how is it right now? Letting your body settle. So this is an effort we can make that's not really intrusive or grasping, which is to just sort of let the body soften. And even as we do that, to notice where it doesn't want to soften. And maybe you can relax those places, or maybe you can't. So the places that tension tends to arise include the jaw, so to relax the jaw. That alone can have an effect on the whole body. And the same with softening the belly, the other place we tend to tighten. So let your breath go deep. Just let the belly out. Nobody's looking. Then there's a kind of feeling of letting the shoulders go. So just feeling your body sitting. Just feeling the life of the body. Even as we sit still, there is movement. Certainly the movement of breath, but also the heart and the blood and the nervous system. The signals being transmitted from all through the body. I don't know how much you're hearing through this microphone, but if you're picking up the sound of the construction here, see if that can just be part of your meditation. Just sound. Perhaps experienced as unpleasant, but just sound nonetheless. And let yourself connect with the breath. Feeling either the touch of air at the nostrils coming in and out, or the movement of the belly rising and falling. So we have this intentional effort to feel the breath as a concentration object. And then as we sit, we also notice when one of the hindrances pulling us away, distracting us, or disturbing us. There's just the physical hindrances, this sleepiness and restlessness. These are very common. It's something to check in with as you start your sit. Are you already tired? Or are you a little anxious, antsy, not really ready to be still? It's probably more common for the sleepiness to come after a certain amount of time in the meditation as we get more calm. So this is one of the reasons to hold a strong upright posture, to make sure the chest is very open, the breath can move through the body easily. But you can also open your eyes when there's sleepiness. With restlessness, the calming effort, the relaxing part that we've already done can be emphasized. The hindrances of desire and aversion are more mental and emotional. Though they can be tied in to the other hindrances. The desire is a kind of reaching out, kind of looking for something better, something more, maybe something stimulating or pleasurable. The aversion is the opposite of this, the wanting to get away, the not liking, wishing things were different. And yet there really are two sides of the same coin. And here they tie in with restlessness, the desire to get something different, make something different. That the way things are isn't sufficient. Needs to be changed. So in those states, we naturally are not paying attention to our present moment experience. So we're trying to get to another experience. So mindfulness asks us to turn toward the present moment, to be with the moment, whether it's unpleasant, there's something we don't like about it, or whether we're just bored with it. We want some more stimulation. There's nothing very exciting about the breath or about sitting still. Our ordinary mind will often be unsatisfied with this. We have to encourage the mind, encourage ourselves to look more deeply, to feel the breath in all its nuances. To open to the felt experience of the present moment. There is a beauty, there is a delight in the simplicity of being that this practice is trying to guide us to. But we have to kind of climb over the obstructions to that, the conditioned preferences, to get to that quieter place, to get to that place where it doesn't have to be different, where we're okay with how it is. Any such arriving in a place of peace is temporary as well. We don't get to just stop making effort because we've arrived. habitual patterns, the hindrances, will keep showing up. So we have to stay engaged, committed. The fifth hindrance of doubt is what undermines us, what makes us question whether we can do this or whether it's worth doing at all. Why bother? Fundamentally, this is just another kind of aversion. It's a negative attitude, and one that really only can exist when we don't investigate deeply. When we truly engage the practice, doubt is smashed. All right. So, were you guys hearing noises coming through my microphone from the construction? No, I'm seeing people shaking heads. Nobody?
No.
Oh, amazing. It's not that loud. I mean, I'm in the basement, but, you know, people clomping around on the roof with machines tends to be noisy. Great. So yeah, I want to get into first just to go through these two classic metaphors that the Buddha gives for the hindrances, and then I think I'm just going to focus on desire today, and we'll sort of see how it goes. But so the probably the most popular of the of the images that the Buddha gives of the five hindrances is one. I usually talk about it as a pond, but in the sutta I'm looking at, the Buddha talks about it as a bowl of water. He says that the desire is like there's a bowl of water that's got colorful dyes in it, and we look in it and to look at our reflection in the water, and that you can't see the reflection properly. That instead you're seeing this, seeing through rose-colored glasses, as we kind of say in our culture. And I, the other way I like to think of this, rather than looking at a reflection, looking at a reflection is a good way of thinking about it. But I also I like the idea that there's water, like a pond or a lake, and you're trying to see to the bottom, kind of, and that the colorful dyes kind of delude you, that you don't see the truth, but you see that you get caught up in seeing all this beauty, and you get like uh, more obsessed with that, with like looking at it. Either way. So then the second way that the second hindrance, the aversion or resentment, anger, this is like a bowl of water that's being heated up, and it's bubbling and boiling. So that, I think that's a great image for anger, because anger has this physical quality of heat. The roiling water, the boiling water, roiling and boiling. The with sloth and torpor, the sleepiness. How does he say it? Right. It's like a bowl of water covered with water plants and algae. This is where I think a pond makes more sense. Again, but you think, you've seen a pond with a lot of algae in it, just thick. And that's like, oh, sleepiness. Like I'm falling asleep. Oh. Then restlessness is like there's wind whipping across the water. And then doubt is it's muddy. You can't see it. You can't see things clearly at all. So those are really nice images for that really capture those states. And but the other set of similes the Buddha gives, I have to pull this one out. Got all my fun texts here. Is he's talking about how it feels when you let go of the hindrance. But I think, as I was looking at this yesterday and thinking about it, I think it's really interesting to look on it in a slightly different way. But I'll start by telling you what the Buddha says. He says that for someone who has abandoned the hindrance of desire, it's like someone who has finally paid off a debt. You've been in debt, and now yet feeling of relief. Ah, I don't have that burden over me anymore. For someone who is let go of the hindrance of resentment or of aversion, it's like someone who's been sick and they get well, and how great that feels when you're not sick anymore. For someone who is come out of sloth and torpor, or sleepiness, it's like coming out of prison. And then for someone who is coming out of restlessness, it's like coming out of slavery, being freed from slavery. And then you can see these, there's a lot of potential in these, right? So then for someone who is coming out of doubt, it's like someone who says, a man of wealth and property, if he were to enter a road across a desert, but later on he would cross over the desert safe and secure with no loss to his property, then he would be glad and full of joy. So it's like somebody who's gone through a desert, and this is a typical image in Buddhism, because there would be these traveling merchants who would carry things through deserts. So you get through that without being robbed. So I want to go back to this first one. If we think of desire as kind of obsessive desire as being like having a debt, being that you can't pay off. No matter how much you pay, it just, the interest, it's like you owe it to the mob, and every time you pay it off, they, oh, no, sorry, you didn't catch up with your VIG, and it keeps getting worse and worse. And this sense of just, it can never be satisfied. So that really, that's what desire is like as an addict, right? That it's just, it goes on, and it doesn't matter how much you drink, it doesn't matter how many drugs you take, you still need more. There's never enough. So you're always in debt. And so I think that sort of embodies that feeling of never being satisfied, never being able to pay off a debt. It's a horrible thing to imagine. It's almost like a nightmare, like if you were having a dream where you couldn't pay off a debt, But that's what I owe you. Oh no, you owe me more. And then, but if we think about it, okay, that does kind of capture what it's like to be an addict, or what it's like to be caught in desire. But what's the cure for that? You can't pay off that debt. The cure is to realize there is no debt. The debt is in my mind. I've created the debt. There's a question about which sutta this is. So this sutta that has the debt in it is from the Majjhima Nikaya. It's number 39. I'll put it in. But it really struck me as I was thinking about this, like, that's verse 13. Whoops, I sent that to Angela instead, sorry. How odd that is, that like, wait, because I was thinking, okay, how do you pay off the debt? And I was like, oh no, you don't. There is no debt. That's just in our mind. And isn't that the way our addiction is? When you get, for many of us, I know it's not true for everybody, for many of us, once we stop, it's kind of like, what was I doing? I mean, it's been a long time for me, so it's pretty easy for me to just go, what's, what's the point? Like, why did I let myself be shackled to that problem? You know, there was no debt. So I think that I want to look then at another traditional teaching, since we're kind of going in here outside of the just straight recovery talk. And this comes from what are called the commentaries. So suttas, which sutta is the Pali, and sutra is the more common word that people know, and that's the Sanskrit. So Sanskrit and Pali are very similar languages. So the suttas are the earliest texts that we have that claim to be directly from the Buddha, and there's been like archaeology about them. There's a whole like historical exploration of what's really legitimately original text and how close is it to what the Buddha really said, all of that. So there's no, we obviously don't have exact words, but there's a consensus that a lot of what's in the suttas can be attributed to the Buddha, somewhat largely because it's so consistent. We see the same things being said over and over through thousands of texts. So it's pretty clear that the Buddha had some basic messages, and then around the edges of it, there's variations and questions. But so all of that came out of within a couple hundred years after the Buddha's death, which is approximately around 500 BC. But along with the suttas then grew up what are called commentaries. So the early commentaries were like things that people might have remembered or heard that were peripheral to the the actual sutta. So the sutta might be about some person, like a Brahmin, and then there might be a commentary that says, oh yeah, this Brahmin, he came from this part of India, and this was his family, and this was his background, and this is what he was doing there. That this is why he went to the Buddha, because he was interested in, his business was this, or his interest was that. And so you get this kind of expansion on the stories, which makes it interesting just narratively, some of the suttas, to get these expanded narratives. But later what comes in the commentaries, and some of this might be earlier too, that again, this is, we don't have the exact history around this, but there was also, probably more importantly, an effort to explain what the Buddha meant. When he said this, what was that? Or what are we supposed to do about that? So it kind of expands on his teachings and explains things. And eventually, there was a push, and this comes, I think it's around 500 AD, so now we're talking about 1,000 years after the Buddha, to codify all these commentaries, to kind of bring them all together into something that would be, become part of the canon, be really not just like random stories. And so Buddha Gosa, who was the person who did this, was sort of asked by the the Buddhist leaders in Sri Lanka to kind of take on this project. And he apparently like took all these ancient commentaries and kind of filtered them out and organized them into different areas, different topics. Um, and but then there's a question as to how much more he added. Like how much was it there and how much is sort of through his own filter. Uh, in any case, what arises out of that is considered one of the most important texts in Theravadan Buddhism. It's called the Visuddhimagga, which means the path of perfection. Right? Path of perfection. I got that right, I think. Uh, and so a lot of what we hear, particularly out of like Burmese and Sri Lankan monks, isn't from the suttas, but it's from the Visuddhimagga. And there's sort of a whole movement in Western insight tradition to go back more to suttas and to not necessarily take the Visuddhimagga as being the original source. So particularly around things like the jhanas, the concentration practice, the whole practice of metta that you learn from Sharon Salzberg, all the sort of categories of people, that's all out of the Visuddhimagga. That's not in the suttas. I didn't mean to make this into a academic session this morning, but it is one of my interests, and you know, it's helpful. I just want people to be, I want us all to be educated about what it is that we're studying. So, this teaching on the antidotes to the hindrances comes from the Visuddhimagga. This is why I went there. I knew I had a reason. And I'm taking this from Venerable Analayo's book on the Satipatthana Sutta. So here are what are called the, here's what the Visuddhimagga says, 4 antidotes to craving or desire. General acquaintance with and formal meditation on the body's unattractiveness. That's always one of the most popular meditations. That's 1. 2, guarding the senses. 3, moderation in food. 4, good friends and suitable conversation. Now, this needs a whole commentary in and of itself, because it's not really, I don't think it's transparent how this would work. The first one, the meditation on the body's unattractiveness, fundamentally, this was taught to the monastics. It was taught to monks and presumably nuns, but especially monks, to help them to quell lust. You know, you've got these young men who are celibate and they're trying to meditate. So you're trying to get them to stop thinking about sex. So what do? Well, what the Buddha says is, try thinking about how disgusting bodies really are. You know? So this is not popular in Western culture. But you know, it's interesting. So this is my version. So there's a whole like thing about you go through all the parts of the body, the hair of the head, the hair of the body, the hair. You know, then bile and phlegm and the organs, the liver and the kidneys, and you're thinking about this person that you find you're really turned on to, and then you start thinking about all their organs and the But what I suggest as a more simple antidote is that you just look up your lover's nose and that in itself should quell any lust. Look in their ears. That's good too. Any orifice will do. That pretty much takes care of lust right there. And yeah, maybe not, but it's one approach. Um, but philosophically, it's kind of an interesting. I don't know if I mean philosophically, but just or maybe just conceptually, it's an interesting point because we sort of glorify sexuality, we glorify beauty, uh, and of course we commercialize it and exploit it in all these ways. And yet, very, very, very few people at any given time fit into the models of beauty as they're defined by the commercial culture. I'll call it that. You know, once you're over 50, you're kind of done. If you're not the right color, or you aren't shaped in the right way, it any one little flaw, and you're out, right? So right away, this idea of sexual beauty is so. Uh, some of you probably have better words for this, but it's just so narrowly defined. And so, just the point being that we give it so much power, and yet it's really not something that's very real. It's very limited in its reality. So, and how about this? We think that human bodies are so human bodies create all this lust, and yet we cover most of the parts of it because a lot of the parts of it we don't consider really attractive. Knees and elbows and armpits, they're not really things that people get excited about. Toenails. You have to paint them, right? You have to paint them up. Right? Everything has to be, shaved. I just took an electric device to get the hair off my face this morning because I don't think the hair on my face is attractive. Anyway, that's kind of I guess that's really a complete diversion. Uh, but it is a point, that I suppose it's obvious what I'm getting at, but just to put a finer point on it, that desire is something we really create, and it's uh, we have to work hard to even create desirable things, and yet we let it obsess us and run our lives in so many ways. So the idea of overcoming sensual desire is not so extreme if we just kind of look at it differently and sort of, in a way, it's just a kind of uh, take the priority away, uh, of certain types of beauty, right? And so there's two things we can do. We can either say, well, everything is just neutral, maybe just everything is what it is, or we can say, oh, there's an inherent beauty in everything, and I think that mindfulness is pointing to that to a great extent. And one of the things that's so striking when we have a powerful experience of mindfulness and concentration together is that things that ordinarily seem neutral, like the breath, can become beautiful. And that you step out of a meditation hall after 3 or 4 days of being in silent meditation, and the grass is just strikingly beautiful. The sky captures you. And so this idea of, oh, only certain things are worthy of my appreciation opens up. So beauty becomes something more broad and less focused on craving. But so that there's kind of a shift from our relationship to things and people being about wanting, and a shift into appreciating. And I don't know if that's a thing, but it's very interesting that that's kind of a natural evolution of this practice, that we develop less aversion to the unpleasant, and we develop less craving for the pleasant. But then there's this other, as those things lessen, something else arises, this appreciation, the heart opening, the beauty, rather than, oh, there are just certain people that I like and certain people that I care about and certain people I don't like, that there's much more this sense of appreciation of all beings. So I guess that's one way of kind of flipping desire, stepping out of desire and aversion, is to shift from this sort of, I guess, hierarchical, and like, giving certain things more value based on how you perceive them, whether the way they look or taste or smell or sound, and rather looking at things more in this broad, open way. That was sort of a strange way to spend our morning, I guess, or at least an hour of our morning. But as you know, many of you have been with me quite a bit, and you know that I think if you didn't know, you sense that for me this is an exploration, and it's not. I don't really want to just tell you stuff that I already know, or that I think I know. I'd much rather take a risk and explore something with you. So I hope that hasn't been, tedious for you this morning. I, I, you know, I think it's going to require that we talk more about desire in the next session, and because I want to go over these other antidotes, but I'd also like to hear from you guys, and I'm going to try to pull out some other more contemporary things about craving, because there's a great book by Judson Brewer that's called Craving, and it looks more at the scientific part of it. So I'll try to look into that, and we can go a little bit more into this on Friday. Yeah, thanks for Angela for putting up all that information about my upcoming retreats. I did just post on my website the Vajrapani, what's traditionally we call the Vajrapani retreat, which is in September 30th to October 4th, and it's just it'll be again like this, but instead of teaching alone as I usually do, or have one teacher with me, we're going to have a team of teachers, and we're going to try this retreat format and see if it works for people. It's our only choice right now, But I also think it has a lot of potential. And I've been sort of talking about that with people about the possibility that you could have a really nice intensive retreat at home if you set aside the time and you prepare and you can, depending upon your life circumstances, uh, and you might be able to have a very deep retreat. And if you don't have life circumstances that allow for that, you could still attend the retreat, which is basically going to be I think, 3 sessions a day of like an hour and a half. And then we're going to sort of recommend what you can do in between. But, uh, if you have other responsibilities, you could just come for the meditations and the talks and then just sort of do the rest of your life and see how that worked. So you can, if you have questions, you can email me about that. But it's going to be pretty straightforward. There'll be a sitting and then a talk, and there'll be a Q&A, and we'll have you'll be meeting with teachers in small groups every other day. And there'll be Qigong and loving kindness meditation. It'll be really nice. Anyway, thank you all. Just take care of your bodies right now. Stay safe. I know I presume that people who come on my calls or whatever we call these are people who are wise in self-care. But I do hope that you're all healthy and avoiding any risks. And, so until Friday, may all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be free from addiction. May all beings be safe, healthy, happy. Take care. Bye.
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 Thank you, Kevin.
Kevin.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
David. Thank you.
Bye.
Again, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.